I've always felt that the sky is one of the most important parts of any outdoor nature photo and really a lot of other types of photography genres that are out there. And because of that, before we can even work on the sky, we need to be able to select or mask it, pretty much the same thing. And there are several tools that can do that. They all work a little bit different. They're all useful in some way, shape, or form in different cases. And I think it's good to have a couple of different ones to fall back on when one tool isn't quite working for you, to know that you've got another option to work on that sky. So let's go ahead and jump in. Now, I am inside of Lightroom Classic, and I'm mostly going to be using the masking tools in the masking panel. And just understand, they are the same exact tools if you're using Lightroom, not Lightroom Classic. They're the same exact masking tools inside of here. And then if you're opening a raw photo in Photoshop Camera Raw or editing with the Camera Raw filter, they are the same exact masking tools. They all work exactly the same. So everything you see that I'm doing here will work in any Adobe Raw editor that you're using. So we'll start off here with Select Sky. I do bare minimum edits to the photo before I work on the sky. So I might open up the shadows a little bit, but generally I'm going to get to the sky pretty quick. So I'll head over here and we'll use Select Sky. Select Sky is probably my favorite. It's going to be where I always go to first. And it generally gives me a good selection. So in this case, I wanted to darken that sky a little bit so I could pull back on exposure. And it's not a bad selection. Sometimes it does miss certain areas. So if I were to zoom in on this photo, you can see if I turn on the overlay, and if I switch it over here to black and white, you'll see that it missed a little bit of that mountain down there. Not all of it, but definitely a little bit of it. So what I would do here is just go in, let's go change this back to a color overlay and turn that overlay off. What I would do here is essentially I want to bring what I did to the sky down into that mountain a little bit. So I would just go to Add, go down to Brush, and whatever brush settings that you're using here. Most of the time I keep all the settings cranked up to 100, but in this case I would bring that flow down, which is kind of similar to opacity. Make sure feather is up at 100, and I would just use that brush. You can see it's got the outline around it. I would just use that brush and just kind of chip away in there. Not go full blast down into the mountain like that, but I would just use the edge of the brush. All right, keep the middle over the sky and just let that edge fade away into that specific area a little bit. Okay, and that would help out. But Select Sky, that's typically going to be the first one we go to. It did a great job, and it typically does a great job of selecting the sky. And actually, even you know, in a way, again, if I were to go to this black and white mode, sometimes we don't want a perfect selection, and sometimes that selection does need to bleed into the foreground a little bit. Does it need to here? In some cases it does, and if it is a problem, you could just go to Subtract, and you could use the brush tool. Use a small brush tool, again, low flow setting, and you can go and chip away at those areas where maybe it bled a little too much into and take care of them. But that's really going to be the first line of defense is going to be Select Sky. From there, we go over to a photo like this. If I go to my masking tools and I go to Select Sky, you're going to see we get a problem with this. And this happens to me fairly often, where it's totally not seeing the sky that it should. All right, it did get the sky, but it got way more of the photo than it should have. In this case, switch back to our red overlay here. In this case, I don't think using the brush tool or any other tools would be the answer to do this. In this case, what I would do is, instead of using Select Sky, I'd use the tool that we used to use quite a bit before the AI-powered sky selections came in, and that's the linear gradient. And that one just simply drag down and let it kind of fade its way in. It's similar to a graduated neutral density filter, not a neutral density filter, graduated neutral density filter that we used to use in the field. This would be a very hard transition. So you're going to see a line. This would be a very soft transition, and that line will soften and feather as you were to go in here and start to make any adjustments, bring down the highlights a little bit, maybe open up some shadows so the clouds don't get too dark. But that would definitely help ease that transition. It's not going to be perfect, but we don't need perfect in this case. We just need something to take down the exposure of the sky a little bit. If I were to continue on with this edit, it makes a great example of how Select Sky doesn't always work. And that's why I used it here, because the linear gradient does work. But there's a couple other things we could do to refine it. So I'll just show you what I would do here. Number one, the tree is definitely going to be an issue there. You can see it's whatever I'm doing here is working on the tree. So I would also go in here and hit subtract, and I would use the object selection tool. And this is going to come up again in just a minute, but I would go in there and subtract that out of the mask. So that way that's not included as part of the mask anymore. Okay, so that's one thing that I would do to it. Another thing I would do, I don't mind the color of the sky at the top. It's the color of the sky as it gets into the middle ground here. I'd probably go to subtract, and I go up to linear gradient again, and I would just pull down a linear gradient and just find that good transition point. Just kind of finesse it in there. Again, it still gradiates from the top down. To me, it was a little bit too harsh of a gradation. It's the way I took it. You didn't see me do any edits to it, but to me, it was just a little bit too harsh. It was a little overbearing. So as you look at it now, I'm able to bring down that area and just finesse that a little bit as well. Speaking of finessing things, you might want to finesse your way into my Master the Sky with AI course. This course was created really because I do think the skies are one of the most important parts of so many different photos, and I wanted to dedicate it something specific to the sky because it is so important. It's basically broken up into 3 little mini courses. Part 1 is crafting the sky, how to do the toning and advanced color, any distraction removal to make those skies that are in your photos look great. And that's by far the biggest part of the course. It's the main part of the course. Part 2 is for those of you who want to do sky replacements. We dive deep into sky replacements and all the different ways that you can use them. And then part 3, for those of you that want to go that extra step and maybe even generate your own sky using AI, we'll talk about that. So depending on when you're watching this, the course might only be announced or on sale, but you can find out more information at the link below. Okay, let's go take a look at our last example here. So select sky, not going to do a great job here, especially if I were to switch this mask over to white on black. You'll see that there's a lot of spillover inside of there that it's picking up. So select sky is probably not gonna be the best option for us for this one. The linear gradient, again, probably not going to be the best option here for us because it's tough to get in there and get that to work. Again, I showed you some methods where you can modify it if you need to. So I'm not saying this is the only way to do it, but use this one as your last resort, but tuck it away as a possibility for working with your skies, and that is go in there to the object selection tool. So many people miss out on this tool. It's one of my favorite masking tools here. And then all you gotta do is almost essentially just go and paint around something. All right. Sometimes I scribble in, sometimes I don't. You don't even have to finish the area, but it should do a pretty good job of going in there and selecting it. You can see it missed that area here, but that's better than what our other methods missed. This is just less work for me to have to do. So I could go to subtract again with a brush and could probably chip away at that area a little bit, or even try to go to subtract objects and paint over that and see too much. So the brush is probably going to be the way that we would go there, and then I could get in here and start to maybe darken and work on that sky a little bit. So again, that's not going to be the one I go to the most, but it is one of those tools that when you need it, you really need it, and it's good to have options when it comes to those things. Also, chances are, if you're enjoying this video, that you are into masking and selections, and I happen to have another video. It's free to watch right here. It's on getting rid of those pesky little halos that might hang around after some of your masking and adjustment selections. So if you're looking for a video to go watch next, it's a perfect place to go.